Hi, welcome.
Thank you so much.
So just to jump into it, could you tell me a little bit about you, who you are, and your practice?
Absolutely. So my name is Dr. Julianna Allen. I am a pelvic health physical therapist, and I own Embrace Physical Therapy and Wellness, which is an inclusive pelvic health practice aimed at really people of all genders. And while I work a lot in the pregnancy and postpartum space, I also treat people through a vast variety of different pelvic health conditions, including going through gender affirming surgery and using dilators and binding safety. But of course, also all of the pelvic floor and physical things that people go through and after gestation.
Awesome. And what are you queering right now?
What am I queering? I mean, I try to queer a lot of things, but I really am celebrating learning more and taking more courses in trans health specifically because I really love helping people through that process. And so that would be a kind of my sort of biggest connection to queering things right now.
That's awesome. That's so important. And what inspired you to do the work that you do?
Yeah, so I love this question because I am not like a traditionally you know maybe either go to your like a bachelor's degree and then you go straight to graduate school, and I took some time off. I got my bachelor's degree and then I took some time off and actually worked in mental health and in an eating disorder facility for a while. But going back to when I was getting my bachelor's degree, I took some, at that point they were called women's studies classes, and I just was so like kind of overcome with the inequity of healthcare and the inequity of everything around especially at that point people who are women. And I thought, you know what, I want to do something in my life that really helps with that. And at the same time I was exploring my queer identity, and but at that point I didn't know what I was going to do. So fast forward working in a facility for people with eating disorders. And I really loved it when we did treatments that were exposing people and their bodies to different sensations. And I realized, I've always loved physical things. I've always loved, looking at movement patterns and everything like that. So I thought, I'll go to physical therapy school. So in order to go to physical therapy school, I worked in an office, a physical therapy office. And I actually found out, unlike many people who go to PT school, I found out about pelvic health. And I thought, what, that sounds really cool and interesting. I've always thought it's like fun to learn about and talk about intimacy and sex. And so why not try that? And, so I went to PT school, and I was super, super lucky in that I got to work in pelvic health during my graduate degree while I was getting my doctorate. And it was just mind blowing how many specific things birthing people's bodies go through that aren't then addressed, that people just accept as parts of being a birthing person, being a mom, being a parent, is, just astounding. Like all of the pain, just pain with feeding, pain with intercourse afterward. And I just was, my mind was blown, and I was like, it's crazy because it's a whole different thing, because we can actually help a lot of these things. There's physical therapy for the pelvic floor and for the hips and back. And I was just immediately like struck by how absolutely cool it was to learn how to work with someone's body like that.
And how would you describe your sort of support philosophy or your philosophy towards pelvic health physical therapy?
I love the idea of being a guide. I find that there is so much unknown about the pelvis, the pelvic floor, about how bodies change during gestation, and what kind of is necessary and what is common but not normal. So I love guiding people through what how their body's going to change, and what might be something that is expected but maybe isn't the most desirable thing, and then teaching them how we can actually both accept what has to change, but also to really provide preparation and healing afterwards. So I would say I'm a big fan of teaching and guiding, because I teach a lot about the body in places that we just don't know how our bladders function, how our abdominal wall is affected by gestation, how our pelvic floor is affected, and really how we can kind of prevent a lot of that and heal it afterwards. So I'm a big fan of kind of guiding people through that experience.
And that's such important knowledge, right? Because those are all parts of our bodies that we don't get a lot of information about at any point in our lives, sort of, except for like perhaps if you find yourself seeking physical therapy like around the experience of pregnancy.
Yeah, it's I think, you know, quite sad in some ways, because in other countries, like in France, every birthing person gets sent to pelvic floor physical therapy, no questions asked, right afterward. And actually the United Kingdom has just adopted that and is putting that into practice as well. And so, you know, I think it's, you know, fantastic that pelvic floor therapy is becoming more and more known here. But it's really interesting that you say that around, you know, going to physical therapy around, you know, gestation, because there are so many times that I see people who are not just around that period too. And I have so many people ask questions about, oh, isn't that just for people who are going through pregnancy? And really that's not true. I see people for pelvic floor issues, you know, around lots of different things. Just people who've never had children often have urinary urgency or have issues with overactive or tight muscles. And, you know, it's often something that's worth thinking about even before pregnancy, but of course also during and after. So I just love that you brought that up, because everyone has a pelvic floor. And while not everybody needs therapy for their pelvic floor, it is something to know that is always there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's such an important point, right? That so often we think that this is like just, if people think about it at all, right, it's just around these times of like very dramatic transition, but that's just not true.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and you know what, you always have your pelvic floor, and your pelvic floor is going through this dramatic transition, and, you know, and going through COVID times and going through everything, because, you know, our bodies are, you know, a lot of people get stress in, you know, certain areas of their bodies with, you know, all of the stress of this situation, and the pelvic floor can show that as well. So, you know, it's worth knowing that it's, you know, it's not just a forgotten part of your body, even if we don't think about it every day.
Absolutely. And so I've asked you about your natal work, and now I want to know about your natal chart. What's your sun, moon, rising?
So I am a Libra, proud Libra, love that balance, or at least I like to say that I like thinking about it, because I feel like sometimes I'm not always, you know, the most like calm, fair, balanced person. And then I just love thinking, okay, nope, I'm a Libra, I'm going to bring some of that in. And then my moon is a Capricorn and rising is Virgo.
Awesome. And what's your favorite thing about being a queer support person working with queer and trans folks?
I love talking about, I mean, specifically, I love talking about how queer people interact with one another, even when I'm with, yeah, like for instance, people who are not part of the queer community, because one of the big things that I address is intercourse and intimacy after birth, postpartum, and that can be a really different experience for various both biological and emotional things, reasons. And one of the big things that I say to people is queer up your sex life, if they haven't heard that before, because for a lot of people in, you know, and not in the queer community, it's all about, you know, PIV penetration, and that's the, you know, that's the pinnacle. And I really think that, you know, in the queer community, we have just a head start on that. So I love bringing kind of my queer knowledge into, okay, well, you know what, maybe you're not ready to have intercourse, you know, even if you've hit your 6-week checkup and everything's okay, that doesn't mean you're ready. That means that your body is healing, but you're not ready. So I often am talking through intimacy and different ways to approach that very much, you know, come from, you know, a lot of research that I've read and courses I've taken, but also just my experience in the queer community and knowing what we're like. And I just love supporting queer and trans families, because, you know, it's such a special thing coming to creating a family when, you know, we've had the opportunity in many cases to create our own chosen families, but to also have the opportunity to potentially bring, you know, a biological child into, you know, such a warm and wonderful community. It's just so happy for me, because I find that there's so much support. Like often when I am not in the queer community working with birth, it's sometimes just the, you know, just the wife coming to me, just the birthing person coming to me. And I just love how when I work in the queer community, it's okay, well, let's talk about your pelvic floor, but with everybody else, and everyone else is going to be involved in your rehab. And that's just so built in. And I love that.
I really love the idea that like people are coming to see you and like the advice that they're getting is to queer up their sex lives. What a dream.
Yep. I would say I use those words a fair amount. Sometimes I don't, depending on how, you have to read the person you're talking to, but it's so true that I think there's just a built-in, they're just the walls of building queer relationships and queer family are so, different from, the heteronormative standards. And so just bringing a little bit of that in, bringing a little bit of that innovation and kind of lack of expectation is such an important thing.
And if you could improve one thing about the experience of pregnancy, birth, postpartum recovery for queer and trans families, what would it be?
Is it a cheat to say see a pelvic therapist?
No, it is not.
Because I think it's such an overlooked thing, and I think it's hard because there aren't that many of us. But just having been in this profession, there are just exponentially more and more, and people like me who are focusing on certain communities and who are able to provide you with care that's going to really resonate with you. I think it's so important because, I like to say, and many people say, prevention, seeing someone during their gestation is really helpful. And that's not to say that there's anything wrong if you don't, but I love the idea of preparing, because the way that I teach, say, learning how to open your pelvic floor muscles for birth is going to be different from someone else. And I can actually feel and I mean, a pelvic therapist can feel those muscles opening. And that's such a magical thing about preparing yourself for birth. And then of course, seeing a pelvic health therapist afterward can be really helpful in terms of just getting your abdominals and your pelvic floor starting to work again, because they've been so distended, which is, a beautiful part of pregnancy, but they've been so distended, they may have been, pushed wide open with delivery, and just having those muscles that are such a critical part of your core, getting them back online is really helpful. So I would say just, A, see a pelvic floor therapist, or B, give yourself the grace and time, but also the attention to your body, especially in those parts that were very drastically changed over a very short period of time.
And what's a piece of advice that you have for new or aspiring queer, trans, pelvic health physical therapists, birth workers in general?
I mean, I think that it's so fantastic that you might be considering this field. I think it's so needed and so rewarding, but I guess my advice is push through your insecurities, speaking from my own personal experience about, coming into my own as a doctor of physical therapy, but also how much do I promote, or am out about my queerness in the space of pelvic health, because, who knows how people will take that. Just be brave, but, let yourself be yourself in these situations, because I think your clients will get so much more out of it, and you will get so much more out of it if you're, able to kind of take that step and be there to help families in the way that you individually can.
Oh, that's so important. Those reminders, I think, are so helpful in these fields that so frequently are, and particularly in these fields where there's so much emphasis on having your own practice and your own business and marketing yourselves in ways that are where you're selling yourself to some abstract general pregnant person.
Yeah.
That reminder about authenticity is always so necessary. And are there any projects that you have going on that you want help cross-pollinating with other folks in birth world?
I have my own practice, for sure, which I always love, people to talk about, comment on, let me know, what their thoughts are. But I currently have a postpartum virtual education program that is specifically aimed at, not just the queer community. It's for anyone who wants it, but we did really spend a lot of time trying to make sure that it is appropriate for people, and the language is worded for people who are, queer, trans, just anywhere, along our rainbow, because I think that's so important. So, it's not exactly an ongoing project, but I do, I love talking about how we, another pelvic physical therapist and I created this program that's really aimed at, how to both help your body directly after labor and delivery in terms of, taking your first poop and pee postpartum. I hope it's okay to say that on here.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
how to support your core when you're just rolling out of bed after, say having delivered by a cesarean, all the way to reconnecting with your core and pelvic floor, to having intercourse postpartum, as well as how to, stop leaking and how to improve your bowel function. So I definitely would love to hear and see, queer people, in our community about that. We have a Facebook group, for what that's worth, called Healthy Pelvis, Healthy Postpartum, that we are always trying to kind of get together a community around.
Awesome. And what's something not natal birth related, pelvic related about you and your life that you want to share?
That's a great question. Well, you and I talked about this a little bit earlier, but I'm actually in a queer feminist wrestling league. So if anybody wants to look into that, it's BLOW, the Boston League of Wicked Wrestlers, and that's not natal, but is very much in this community. So feel free to look us up. We're on all the socials, and of course have our own website, and just check us out, because let me tell you, it's really, really fun.
That is such a vitally important fun fact, and like, wow, what a service to the community. If there's one thing you take away from this, obviously everyone watching, I want you to learn about pelvic health and learn about all the things that, a pelvic health therapist can help you with, or that you could, become someone like me. But if you take one thing away, look up the Boston League of Wicked Wrestlers. You won't regret it. Top tips. Look up the Boston League of Wicked Wrestlers.
Yeah.
If I had
to tell you one thing about your pelvic floor, remember to relax your pelvic floor and go see the Boston League of Wicked Wrestlers. Very related.
It seems like that would help you relax the pelvic floor, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Definitely. It's very relaxing.
And finally, where can people find you on the internet?
So you can find me, my website is embraceptwellness.com. If you search my name, Julianna Allen, you'll probably get there. My Instagram is embracepelvicpt, at embracepelvicpt, and then I have, a Facebook page and everything. So feel free to check me out there. I love questions. I try to answer them, on lives and on with posts, because, I want to know what your questions are about the pelvic floor, about how your body changes, and, honestly, about your hips and everything else that works really hard to support you during gestation.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This was such a blast.
Thank you for inviting me. I am so excited that something like this exists, and I really hope that, everyone watching, in terms of their own career choices, that you do, join us in queer birth work, because it's such a wonderful and rewarding place to be.